Hi, this is Al Jardine, and if you're looking for a great publication on the history of the Beach Boys, check out Endless Summer Quarterly magazine. Thanks, ESQ, for all your years of support.
It's one of the things that happens when you have success when you're young is it kind of sets in stone who you are. And that's who they were, regardless of the striped shirts and the images and all of that as people. So Mike is the oldest, the most responsible member of the group, the one who he gets his girlfriend pregnant and he marries her. And he's now got to pay the bills. So the idea that he wants the group to maintain a commercial identity makes perfect sense.
Yes.
The idea that Dennis is the only Beach Boy, so he's just a wild man, car racing and surfing and girls. The thing that I think I regret about those years in terms of Dennis is that when one hears "Do you want to dance" on as the lead off to today, you're like, oh my God, what if he had been the lead singer of the Beach Boys? And you have, instead of hiding your most charismatic, sexiest member of the group behind a set of drums, he's out front like Don Henley was with the Eagles. Dennis could have been a Mick Jagger like lead singer had he had the discipline and the ambition and who God knows what sort of family
Discipline.
feuds there would have been, Keith, had that come to the fore. So there's all these we can talk about it and debate it and wonder and with the Smile book, I say it early on in the book, it's time for other voices to be heard, for everyone else to tell the story. And I would guess, I still have to connect things and contextualize things and set things up, but I'm the curator now. I'm like in the Smile Museum. I'm the guy deciding what to hang on the wall. And and that's a very different job. I think 75% of the book are other people's words, some number like that. And so I solicited fan responses to what was it like from your memory 20 years later to be at Royal Festival Hall. I started getting messages from fans saying, "Well, I didn't see Royal Festival Hall, but I saw him in Houston. Can I be part of this?" So there's a whole other chapter of people who saw him on the Smile tour. And then there were people who had a lot to say. And I thought, well, maybe I should have an anthology at the back of the book of people expressing longer thoughts about Smile that they haven't had a chance to do. So it's a very and from my point of view, it's a more democratic way of it as opposed to here's the way it is, and that's what I believe. This is more here's the story as I see it, told by all these people. And I didn't put words in anybody's mouth. And and I think that's one of the things I'm proudest of is that these are the people, many of whom are now no longer amongst us, talking about their memories and trying to help us understand what is ultimately inexplicable. I mean, one of the reasons I named the last book God Only Knows was because of the song. Another reason was people will often ask, well, why did this happen? And the answer is God only knows, because there is no explanation, or at least no rational explanation for why certain things happen. But at the same time, keeping our eye on the ball, what matters is the music. So we don't need to see long passages of the Help Me Murray tape anywhere. It's bad enough it exists and we've heard it and we know what's going on, or the letter he wrote after he had been fired, or that he sold the publishing even though he didn't have the legal right to sell it, because undoubtedly Brian was a 50-50 owner with him in Sia Tunes, and he didn't ask Brian's permission. So there's all these horrible stories surrounding this that from my point of view, we don't need to know, because what matters is that ultimately Brian found the courage to do Brian Wilson Presents Smile and give it to us. And the book is a celebration of that for a lot of reasons, including the fact that one of the editors at the publishing company quit. The book didn't make it out in 2024. And as somebody wrote to me, "Don't feel so badly. It's Smile. It's not supposed to come, it's not supposed to come out on time." But so it's come out within the year anniversary of the release of the album. So we'll make it a celebration of that.
So in your book, what I really liked about it is the way that you've covered really the career span of Brian, going through Imagination, et cetera, and, the Brian Wilson album. I saw it as kind of like, and I think this was your intention, that everything was building to what became Royal Festival Hall. You've got the 1993 box set. You've got that half hour or more of Good Vibrations, Heroes and Villains, everything else, all these bits and pieces, which I was totally blown away by that.
Yeah.
Just kept disc 5 in my CD player in the car all the time.
That was really, I didn't realize it at the time that it was pointing towards anything else. But I do know that when I went up to the house to talk to Brian about the box set and show him the track listing, and there's one song, and I won't tell you the name of it, that he said, please take that song off. And it's Brian Wilson, and he wrote it, he arranged it, he produced it, he sang it. If he doesn't want it on the box set, okay. And then I've always been overconfident. And so, to say to Brian Wilson, Brian, there's this giant hole in this box set between Good Vibrations single and Heroes and Villains single. He says, "What do you mean?" And I say, "Well, there's nothing from the Smile sessions. This is a career retrospective. Shouldn't we have some of the music you recorded during that era?" And he said, "Okay." I mean, it wasn't an argument. It wasn't a disagreement. It was just somebody saying, "I think this would be a good idea to do with something that's precious to you." And that was and he said, "What songs should we include?" And I rattled off a bunch of titles off the top of my head, purposely not mentioning Fire, because it's like, okay, I don't even know what that would do. He'd say, "No, never mind, no Smile music." So I was really proud that we were able to do that, and I think that contributed in large part to it being such a big success. And because it was a big success, that led to the Pet Sound Sessions, which was, for Brian and I, the first of a 5-year plan that we had and went to meet with Capitol about. And that was going to be May of 1996. And then in October of 1996, there was going to be a 2 CD Good Vibrations sessions package. And then in the spring of 1997, there was going to be a 30th anniversary Smile Sessions collection. And we had something mapped out for each of all the Capitol stuff to have its own place in the sun, with all the outtakes, some of which ended up on twofers, some of which ended up on other box sets. So he was into it. He was like, "People really want to hear, they want to hear Pet Sounds without vocals?" "Yes, Brian. They want to hear the vocals without," it was, to him, it was like, okay, so there was no teeth pulling here. It was just an artist saying, okay, if you think fans want to hear it, then let's do it. And so the success of the Good Vibrations box led to that, and the story of what happened isn't for today, obviously. But in between the Good Vibrations box and the Pet Sounds box coming out, there were other conversations about Smile between he and I. One time I wrote down, I got my black felt tip marker out and a bunch of 3x5 index cards and wrote down all the titles of Smile songs that we thought we knew. Anyway, I went up there and I said, Brian, let's try to sequence this. I don't think I went up there to do that. I think Eve and I were there, and I said, Brian, let's go in the kitchen. I've got these. Let's try to sequence this. And it was a completely failed exercise. We're just moving index cards around, and it didn't work because it wasn't in a computer, and he couldn't hear it as he could in 2003. And then sometime in that period, I told him I told him I was trying to make this tribute show, and it's like, oh, okay. And then I told him that, at the tribute show, I wanted to have guest artists do Pet Sounds start to finish. Okay. I mean, it was like he was not he didn't disagree. He was just fascinated that I wanted to do all this stuff. And one of the things I wanted to do was I said, Brian, we should get a symphony orchestra to perform the music of Smile and get a choir to sing the vocals. And so the world can hear this beautiful music. And he said, yeah, I deserve that. And he was coming out of the shell that he had been in. So there's the Good Vibrations box set. There's the success of his work with Van Dyke on Orange Crate Art. There's the Don Was documentary, I Just Wasn't Made for These Times, in which he sings a version of a Smile song. David is doing show and tell over there. And then the real turning point that, again, not calculated, not building towards anything. So in 1999, he goes on tour. And I remember hearing that he was going to go on tour to promote the Imagination album and thinking to myself, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I'm glad it wasn't mine. And of course, it was like manna from heaven for him and us, because he was terrified. I mean, we got a call sometime in February of 1999. He was in Chicago rehearsing. He says, I need you guys to come out here. We can't do this. I can't do this unless you're here. He needed people around him who figuratively were giving him unconditional love, as he described it, emotional security. So this was all building. And then in 2000, he does Pet Sounds start to finish, which is like one of the greatest things we ever saw. And that Christmas at a party at Scott Bennett's house, he's sitting on the piano bench with his back to the piano next to Eva. And he says to her, what do you want for Christmas? And she says, for you to play Heroes and Villains. And he turns on, he says, okay. And he starts playing Heroes and Villains.
Just from memory.
Well, he wrote it. It's not.
But it was X number of years ago too.
Getting on a bike.
There's nothing he has forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
There's no piece of music he's forgotten.
Yeah, that's talk about bicycle rider.
Yeah.
On the bike.
He plays it, and the band members who were there that night come running from wherever they are and watch this. And when he finishes it, I said, Brian, you should do that at the tribute. Okay. And now, as the creator of the tribute, I sold it with Chip Racklin, may he rest in peace, and I was the writer of it as well. I had a lot to say about what songs were going to be in the tribute, and so I insisted that Smile music be part of the tribute. And so we had a boys' choir to open the show, not with a Beach Boys hit, but with a piece of music from Smile, like a benediction. And it's, I get goosebumps just thinking about that choir there, and the curtain goes up, and a beautiful image of him, and they sing Our Prayer. I imagine it wasn't the first time it had ever been sung in public, but it was the first time in America. I think my old friend David Scott over in Scotland had done a Smile concert where they had done Our Prayer, but the Beach Boys I don't think ever sang Our Prayer in concert. And and I insisted that Surf's Up be part of the concert. And I remember sitting in you'd have production meetings every day with progress reports, and part of a show like a tribute is how do you get a bunch of name artists to come to the same place at the same time? It's a big challenge because nobody's going to win an award. It's not the Grammys.
Right.
And I had worked on an Elvis Presley tribute. I'd worked on a Ella Fitzgerald tribute. I'd worked on a Christopher Reeve tribute, and the people come to those events out of love for the artist. For the most part, there were a couple of people who were there because it was good for their career. But we're sitting in one of those meetings talking about the songs that are going to be done, and I remember specifically saying we were talking about Surf's Up and who could sing that song. And Allie Gifford, who was the what they called the booker, the talent booker on the show, the person whose job it was to go out and get Ann and Nancy Wilson from Heart to agree to be on the show, to go to Paul Simon and Billy Joel and everybody else and get them to be on the show. She said, "Let me pray on that. Let me think about who could do this." And the next day, she came to the meeting and she said, "Vince Gill." And I had bought Pure Prairie League albums, and so, but I didn't know that was who Vince Gill was. Anyway, it's such a complicated piece that, adding Jimmy Webb and David Crosby was magnificent. I mean, you're anyone watching this can Google Vince Gill plus Surf's Up or Vince Gill plus The Warmth of the Sun, and they will see two of the most amazing performances of Brian Wilson compositions ever. And now you add Brian doing Heroes and Villains into the evening as his opening number, and the shock that you felt in Radio City Music Hall. Brian Wilson is doing Heroes and Villains from Smile. And as Jeffrey Foskett says in the book, may he rest in peace, it was in the same voice. It was in his regular voice. It wasn't in his falsetto voice. So when he started it, it sounded like the record. And it was just stunning. I mean, you see it got a standing ovation. And throughout the entire show, Brian's in the wings watching these people come on and say these amazing things about him and sing his songs beautifully. And that changed him. I can say unequivocally it changed him. Because what I understood that night is people would say to him, "Oh, Elton John's a big fan, Brian," or "So-and-so's a big fan." But the fact that Elton John showed up and did a duet with him on Wouldn't It Be Nice and then sang God Only Knows, Brian was in disbelief. Elton John is singing my song. That's how modest he is. And part of that modesty comes from, and I think it's a sincere belief that it's not his song, that he, as he has said, music is God's voice. It's coming through him. And who are we to disagree? That's why in the book I refer to this Church of Brian Wilson, that if you take it out of the context of the Beach Boys and you listen to him sing, whether it's The Lonely Sea or The Warmth of the Sun or Don't Worry Baby or Please Let Me Wonder or most of Pet Sounds, there's something different about those songs than the Beach Boys hits. Surfer Girls, yeah, it's about a girl and it's got surfer in it because that's what he was doing at the time. But the longing in his voice, the 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 melancholy in his voice, the heartbreak in his voice, it was always there. And he finally saw in those early tours that there was an audience that would actually come and see Brian Wilson. That, because he had been told, you're a Beach Boy. That's your job, to be a Beach Boy. Mike, Dennis, and Carl all did solo albums before Brian did. Because if Brian was going to write a record, it was going to be for the Beach Boys. So in the book, I talk about unintended consequences. So if anybody other than, I won't mention his name, had been hired to save Brian's life, which I believe he did, that person would have kept Brian Wilson in the Beach Boys. That's what the Beach Boys would have wanted. But this person didn't want to answer to the Beach Boys. So when a solo deal came along, he grabbed at it because he could put his name on his executive producer and try to put his name on the songs. And that's Brian breaking away from the Beach Boys. Breakaway, one of my favorite Beach Boys singles. I often think about if that had been their last Capitol record. Breakaway, Celebrate the News, and then the three brothers had gone off and been the Wilson brothers. What would that have given Brian a new way to be part of music full time? Who knows? Just again, an idle dream. But the combination of going on tour and seeing people show up and give them standing ovations night after night, forming Pet Sounds start to finish, getting standing ovations night after night, performing music from Smile. And they started to, when he went back on tour after the tribute, the Smile songs started to seep into the set lists. And after going to England in 2002 and performing Pet Sounds, now the conversation in England is, okay, what are you going to do next? Well, what are you going to follow Pet Sounds with?
Okay, this is interesting to me because this goes back to what happened in 66, 67, isn't it? It's the same thing. What are you going to follow this with, right? So
Absolutely. And so Melinda is saying, Brian, the fans on the board, on the message board, are saying they really would like to see you do Smile. And of course, his answer isn't, yeah, good idea. But he is now comfortable. He has a group of musicians. Are they as good as the guys who were the A-list players in the 60s? Are they as good as Don Randy and Hal Blaine and Carol Kay? I don't think so. They're great players, but they don't have the jazz and classical background of those players where they could take what Brian had written and say, hey, Brian, why don't we do this staccato? They weren't those kind of players. They were capable of faithfully playing what Brian had originally composed and arranged. And they did it beautifully in every which way. And Darian was the leader of the pack in that regard. Darian Sahanaja doesn't get enough credit. No matter how many times I try to give him more credit, he is more modest, which is why I wrote what I wrote at the end of the book about him. At any rate, it's 2003. What are you going to do in 2004? And finally, there's an agreement, a discussion about a grant, essentially, that will allow Brian the time and space and the musicians the time and space to put this all together. Because nobody knew if this was going to be a one and done or if this was going to lead beyond. Nobody knew if he was going to walk up the steps at the Royal Festival Hall, which is why I had my cameraman right behind him, because I said to him when we made Beautiful Dreamer, I said to him, I want you to follow him because I feel like it's going to be like Dead Man Walking. It turned out not to be. He turned out to walk up the steps very confidently, bow right, bow left, sit down at the keyboard and right into there's the guess it's a little marimba part, right into our prayer, and Brian was into it from the first note. So this miracle happened. And the book is the story of how it happened. And so the word resurrection on the cover is not used lightly, because it's not just the resurrection of the music and Brian, but it's kind of the resurrection of the human spirit in all of us. All of us who connected with Brian deeply because of the sadness of the story. We were all wishing, hoping, dreaming that this might happen, never really expecting it would, but we never gave up faith. And it happened.
And I never expected to see Brian Wilson headlining his own show, yet I was proven wrong for a good many years, and grateful that I was.
It's again, I describe it as a row. Remember we're playing dominoes when you were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
And you would set up all these dominoes and have them go off in different. Brian Wilson Presents Smile happens at the end of the dominoes. You pull out a couple in the middle and it doesn't happen.
Culminated ruins domino.
There you
Yes.
go.
Well, David, I just want to hop in briefly. All the things that you've outlined and talked about, to me, to great regard, to a great level, are due in large part to you and your love of Brian, your love of his music, and your ambition of curating and bringing these people to a show at Radio Music Hall, your enduring faith in Brian's music itself. Without that, I don't think we get to the 93 box set. I don't think we get to the Pet Sound Sessions box set. I don't think we get to the 2000 Radio City Music Hall tribute show without that steadfast, heartfelt belief that you hold so dear.
And the nudges you gave. Anybody who's a Brian Wilson fan cannot but thank you for what you've done.
Amen.
Well, I thank you all for saying that. When I interviewed Tom Nolan for Beautiful Dreamer in 2004, after the interview was over, I told him it was his article that had sent me on my mission, that I had found my calling in this article. He started to cry because he had been there when he's the one who Brian said to me, I'm working on a teenage symphony to God. So for him to hear that he had been one of those dominoes meant so much to him, which is why I was so happy that he wrote that essay for the anthology that leads off the anthology in the back of the book with stories we've never heard before, that some of which just make you shake your head and laugh, and some of which make you shake your head and go, "This is unbelievable." It's all unbelievable. I never expected, in 1971 when I formulated the idea, I'm going to move to California, write a book about Brian Wilson, and become his friend and help him finish Smile. And did I believe that was going to happen? I don't know what I believed. I do know this, and this is selfishly, I wanted to hear the rest of it. It's like, I got to hear this music. This music is the most beautiful music I've ever heard. And in hearing Till I Die just before Surf's Up on the album, it was like, well, he can still do it.
Mm-hmm.
All his ability there to break your heart is intact. All his ability to write these amazing harmonies are there, and to sing this heartbreaking song And then you get Surf's Up. So he can still do it. And then this song is great or greater than what Tom Nolan has said. And then right after that, the Beach Boys were playing at Georgetown University near where I was going to college. And I went to see them, my second time seeing them. The first time was just a 25-minute hits show in 1967. This time it was a 2.5 hour plus show, doing, I think, 6, maybe 7 songs from the Surf's Up album. And, nothing could top a Carl Wilson performance of Surf's Up live. And it's November 1971, and I'm standing outside the venue, and I'm with my resident assistant from the dorm, Bob Brown, who went to the concert with me. He was a lifelong Beach Boy fan, bigger fan than I had. I had to borrow his Beach Boys Today album, and that's why to this day it's my favorite of their records. I'm standing there, and he goes, "Look," and I go, "I look," and I look at the right. No, look, right next to me, standing is Mike Love. And like any fan, I started barraging him with questions about Smile. And it's like, after, I don't know how many questions I got out, but he says, relax. I'm going to write about it all in my autobiography. It's 1971. 1975, I moved to California on a Saturday night. The following Monday morning, I'm transferring my unemployment claim from New York to California in the Santa Monica Unemployment Office, which was at the southwest corner of 5th and Broadway. And I come out of the office, and I cross the street going north, and walking towards me is Dennis Wilson. And as I said, I was overconfident, never shy. And I walked up to him and said, "Hi, Dennis. My name is David Leith. I just moved to California to write a book about your brother, Brian. And I wish I could imitate the laugh. Just imagine a big laugh from Dennis. We can see him on some videotapes. And he's just so like, good luck." It was kind of what he said. And then he walked into a building, which I later found out was Brother's studio. So suddenly, I wouldn't say anything became real at that moment, but 3 years to the day that I saw Dennis Wilson in front of Brother's studio, the Beach Boys and the California Myth was in bookstores. Now, it had nothing to do with me seeing Dennis there, but everything to do with me moving to California and seeing, wait a second, there are people, I could talk to them and maybe write a book. Now, I used to drop my classes in college if there was a long-term paper. I wrote for the college newspaper, wrote for the local newspaper. It was 250 words, maybe 500 words. I could do that easy. I was what they used to call a bullshit artist. When I signed the contract to write the Beach Boys and the California Myth, I think it was something like 70,000 words or some number like that. It ended up being longer because I know the update for God Only Knows was over 70,000 words. And I had to keep calling emailing the publisher in England as I'm writing the update, because the contract for God Only Knows was an update from 20 to 30,000 words. And as I'm writing, it's like 1989, and I'm already at 20,000 words. So I email him. I said, "I'm going to need more than 30,000 words." And he says, "Okay, 40." And now it's 1995, and I'm at 40,000 words. I'm going to need, and I just, because there was so much to tell. And even in this book, which is longer, I mean, this book is 350 pages, and it is dense. It is just packed with people talking about Smile. That's pretty much all they're talking about. And there's still a bunch of stuff that isn't in the book. I wouldn't say the stuff that's not in the book isn't important or unimportant, but it just didn't fit in this version of telling it like this. So maybe for the 25th anniversary of Brian Wilson Presents Smile or Beautiful Dreamer, I'll put out a book of just the interviews. Who knows? We'll see. Pretty much, these are all labors of love, and the key motivation behind all of this, in the as Frank Sinatra would say, the September of my years, is that I've got to do it to get it out there, because when we're all gone and people are studying Brian Wilson, this has got to be part of the record. Otherwise, it's just going to be a box in a storage area somewhere. And so I'm driven to get it out there and get it out there, and I've only got 2 more on the drawing board.
Hi everyone, this is Bruce Johnston. I'd like to recommend some terrific reading. It's called Endless Summer Quarterly, ESQ for short, and it's written and published by a great friend of the band's, David Beard. There's so many fantastic articles about our music and incredible pictures that I've never seen. Anyway, I can go on and on and on, but I just want to end with saying, please subscribe to ESQ, Endless Summer Quarterly.